course, we are on the margin, 14.5 to 15, 14.8 to 52. If it is 50 or above, we have mixed mode. If it is below 50, we have face-to-face. But the first month of the course will have mixed mode. And then you sit next to your group member so that you can discuss with your group member on the worksheet. Okay, now we talk about research design. What is research design? Research design is the plans and the procedure for the research. It includes the decision from broad assumptions to detailed methods of data collection and analysis. Broadly, there are qualitative research design or quantitative research design, or there are mixed method research design. For quantitative research design, it assumes that there's objective reality for you to observe, and if it is qualitative research design, you assume that you want to know the details from the personal perspective, from the subjective perspective. We look at it in greater details. Types of research design, 3 types of research design. Qualitative research. It looks at the meaning of individuals or groups and then focus on the individual. From the individual point of view, how they look at the world, how they interpret the world. You look at the complexity of the situation. How the situation may be very complicated when viewed from the individual, viewed from the group. We look at the subjective perspective. Another research design is the quantitative research design, testing of objective realities. Look at the relation between variables. For example, are there relation between age and color preference? We look at the relation between variables. The data are in number, and we use statistical procedure to do quantitative research. The mixed method research, it is the use of both qualitative and quantitative. For example, in the research, you have qualitative in-depth interviews to collect qualitative data, and then use the qualitative data to design the questionnaire. And then you use the statistics to analyze the questionnaire data. There's use of statistics and there's use of qualitative data. It is mixed method research. There's philosophical worldview and research design. One philosophical worldview is the positivist and the post-positivist worldview. It is related to quantitative research method. And look at the causes that probably determine the effects or the outcome. The causes, are there any causes that explain voting behavior? Do young people prefer more democratic ideas? Are there any causes that can explain voting behavior or political stand? There's careful observation of objective reality. The reality is there for you to look at, to observe. It's like observing the physical world. In the scientific world, we observe the physical world. We observe whether we throw a rock from the top, it will fall down. We observe, we make observation. For positivist worldview, it is like observing the physical reality. We just observe the social world. It describes the causal relation. Whether age determine the rate of home ownership. Whether young people, it is more difficult for young people to own their home. Whether it is easier for middle-aged people to own their home. It's age an explanation of home ownership rate. We examine whether there's a causal relation between two variables. The relation between variables, we set up hypotheses. We set up hypothesis. The younger your age, the younger you are, the more difficult you own your home. The older you are, the easier you own your home. It may be the hypothesis. The relation between variables. You test the hypothesis to see whether it is true or not. Then another worldview is the social constructivist worldview. It is related to qualitative research. Qualitative research is related to words. Quantitative research is related to numbers. For social constructivist view, it is related to qualitative research, related to words. You try to seek understanding of the world in which you live and work, especially from the individual's point of view. You interview individuals to seek their understanding of the world, why they feel like this. For example, you do an in-depth interview on a topic, justice in housing policy, how the people feel justice from their perspective. Do they think that need is an important ingredient in social justice? Do they think that right is an important concept in social justice? How they feel it? Do they think that public rental housing should be allocated to those in need, and this is a just arrangement? You do in-depth interview to ask for their views. You look at the subjective meanings and their experiences. The goal of the research is look at the participants' point of view of the situation. And then there's a pragmatic worldview. It tries to do what works, use all approaches that are available, and this underlies mixed method studies. Mixed method studies use quantitative and qualitative research method. Quantitative research design use quantitative research method. Qualitative research design use qualitative research method. Social research. There's qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method research. There's two major social research traditions. Scientific positivist tradition assume natural sciences assumption. It shares the assumption of natural science. It tries to look at the causes and try to find laws of prediction. For example, whether age is a cause of whether you own your home or not. You find the cause. Whether family background is a prediction of whether you can own your home or not. Family background, if you are of middle age, of middle class, of high class, your parents may be rich enough to support you to pay the down payment of your housing, and then you gain home ownership. With the family background is an explanation of whether you can own your home as a young adult. You find out laws of prediction. There's the world of facts which are waiting to be discovered. You observe the social world just as you observe the natural scientific world. For the scientific world, you do observation of the scientific world. For example, if you throw a rock from above, it will fall down. And you do observation, you record your observation. And for social science, it also shares the same assumption for the positivist tradition. You observe the social world. And the other is the interpretive tradition. Look at this picture. How many of you think that it's a bird? How many of you think that it's a rabbit? A bird? Raise your hand. A rabbit 1. It is both a bird and a rabbit, depends on how you interpret it. This is the beak, the eye, and the head of a bird. And if it is a rabbit, this is the mouth of the rabbit, the eye, and the ears. Can you see it? Yeah. It depends on how you interpret it. The reality is not something that we observe, but we also interpret. Can you see it as a rabbit? Yeah, okay, good. It depends on your interpretation. You give meanings to the events. The picture is the same, but it depends on your interpretation. The social world is also like this. It is there, but you also interpret it when you are observing it. It is not just simple observation. You interpret and give meaning to the events. You construct a meaningful life. We try to understand how people construct their meaningful life, how they interpret their life. And it is related to the qualitative research method. The methodology is the worldview, and the worldview influences the lens through which the research is understood, designed, and conducted. The method is the technique for gathering information. There are different methods for gathering information. For example, interviews, questionnaires, focus group. Focus group is similar to interviews, but interview is 1-to-1. Focus group may be 5 to 8 in a group. 5 to 8 participants join a group to discuss a topic. There's a moderator leading the focus group, and they discuss about the topic. They may disagree, they may put up different views, and they may change their views after discussion. They may reach a consensus, or they may disagree in the end. It's a focus group. Interview is 1-to-1, one interviewer interviewing one interviewee. And for focus group, there's the group dynamics. After discussion, you may change your view after discussion. But interview, usually you express your personal view to the interviewer. Okay? Textual analysis. You analyze, for example, newspaper for a year concerning the topic, home ownership. You analyze the newspaper, textual analysis. Core component of methodology, your standpoint. One of the components is your standpoint. As a researcher, you have certain standpoint. For example, you may be a female or you may be a male. If you are a female, you may be more sensitive to gender discrimination. And this may affect your research. You may be more sensitive to gender discrimination, or you choose that topic because you sense the gender discrimination because you are female. Your standpoint may affect the design of the research and certain questions you ask, and even affect your research topic. Theoretical conceptual framework or paradigm. There may be theoretical conceptual framework, and it may be part of your methodology. For example, the feminist paradigm. For example, you are a female and you tend to use the feminist paradigm to look at certain topic as the theoretical framework. And the method is also part of the methodology. The method of data collection, of collecting data, should suit the research topic. For example, if you are conducting a research concerning elders, the elders, they have difficulty moving, and you do not arrange focus group for them to come to meet in a certain position, in a certain room, because they need to travel. And some of them are staying in elderly home, they have difficulty traveling. And you do not have focus group. And some of the female elders, they are not used to expressing their views openly in front of a group of people. Usually we do not use focus group to do research for elders, and we use in-depth interviews instead. And if you are doing research for elders, you usually will not use online questionnaire because elders don't have internet connection and they don't have smart mobile phone. They may have difficulty filling in online questionnaire. And the method should suit the research topic. And all methods have strengths and weaknesses. For example, if you do a survey, do a questionnaire, you can collect information from a large number of people within a short time. But the data are not very in-depth. If you conduct qualitative in-depth interviews, the interview data are very rich, very in-depth, but you cannot reach a large number of people because for one interview it takes 1 hour. You cannot reach a large sample. All research methods have strengths and weaknesses. For social research, there's the qualitative method and there's the quantitative method, quantitative analysis. This picture, I can give 9.5 out of 10 for her looks, 9 out of 10 for her choice of dress, and 10 out of 10 for her dress sense. In numbers, quantitative. Qualitative, in words, she looks beautiful, her dress is awesome, and she dressed very well. In words, qualitative. For qualitative method, you get an in-depth understanding of human behavior and the reasons behind. You look at the meanings, perception, and understanding of the people. For example, you have in-depth interview. You ask about the meaning, the perception of the interviewee. These meanings are given through the eyes of the individual, how the individual interprets the world. The qualitative data is in words, in images. Some of the qualitative methods may be interviews, focus group, textual analysis. Quantitative research method, it is in numbers. You use statistical, mathematical techniques to do the analysis. The data are in numbers, percentage, median income, etc. The examples, for example, surveys, census data. Now we watch a video on qualitative and quantitative.
A survey? If you've done both, then you've participated in qualitative and quantitative research. Come on, pack up your bags and get on the bus, because we're about to journey through qualitative and quantitative research. Welcome to another Journey with Chris, where we will obtain new levels of knowledge and awesomeness. Hello, scholars. Today we're going to journey through the basics of qualitative and quantitative research. On our journey, we're going to compare the characteristics of both kinds of research, including their purpose, research questions, hypothesis, data analysis, and final reports. Let's talk about the purpose of both types of research. The purpose of qualitative research is to explore the meaning of people's experiences, the meaning of people's cultures, the meaning of how people view a particular issue or case, known as a case study. But the purpose of quantitative research is to examine the relationship between variables. Let's define a variable. A variable is a characteristic. We'll talk more about this in just a second. But for this class, we're going to learn about 3 kinds of variables: independent, dependent, and extraneous. Independent variables are variables or characteristics that are manipulated by the researcher. Dependent variables are characteristics that are impacted by that manipulation of the independent variable. Extraneous variables are variables that are extraneous to what the researcher is really trying to focus on, and they're usually demographic information such as age, sex, race, ethnicity, things like that. So let's say a researcher makes a poster that says, "Hey, you probably got some of you or other people's pee or poop on your hands, so wash your hands." The researcher puts puts up that poster in one bathroom and doesn't put it in another bathroom. Then the researcher watches to see if more people wash their hands after peeing or pooping who were exposed to the poster compared to those who were not exposed to the poster. It turns out that more people washed their hands who went to the bathroom where the poster was. The independent variable in this study is the poster on the wall. It was manipulated by the researcher. The dependent variable was the characteristic of hand washing. It was the effect of there being or not being a poster in the bathroom. Some extraneous variables are the people in the bathroom's age, sex, race, ethnicity, and so on. The point of the study was to examine the relationship between these variables. More hand washing, the dependent variable, took place in the bathroom that had the poster, which was the independent variable. Let's talk about research questions. Since qualitative research is exploratory in nature, qualitative research questions usually start with the words what or how, since these words imply discovery or exploration. Excuse me. For example, a qualitative research question could be, what are college students' experience in trying to eat healthy on campus? Or, how do college students celebrate the subcultural holiday of 420? Because qualitative research is exploratory, it typically does not have a hypothesis, which is a prediction. In a nutshell, qualitative research tries to explore, not predict, participants' views. Similar to qualitative research, quantitative research questions can start with the words what or how, but they might also include the word does in the beginning of the question. In descriptive quantitative research, research questions ask how much, how often, what's the relationship between variables, what's the difference between the variables. For example, what percent of male college students wash their hands after using campus bathrooms, or what is the relationship between college student gender and hand washing practices after using campus bathrooms? In experimental research questions, this is where they might start with the word does, such as, does hand washing increase when a poster is placed in a campus bathroom? Compared to quantitative research does have hypotheses or predictions about what will happen in the study. Typically, in qualitative research, researchers collect more than one type of data in order to get a better, more holistic picture of what's going on in the field. The data used in qualitative research is almost always in what people say or their words. This data usually comes from interviews, documents like newspapers or journals, etc., observations and audiovisual materials like videos or audio recordings. Researchers usually obtain multiple types of these kinds of data in order to answer a research question. All of this data comes from the field, which means the natural settings where participants are. In qualitative research, researchers go into the field and spend a lot of time there interviewing and observing the participants in their environments. It's also important to note that surveys or questionnaires are also known as instruments. Well, in qualitative research, there are no instruments, no surveys. In qualitative research, the researcher is the instrument. What this means is that the researcher acts as an instrument. The researcher is kind of like a living survey. They ask all the questions and make observations instead of relying on surveys to gather data. It's also important to note that a hallmark of qualitative research is its emergent design. This means that the way in which the study is conducted can change during the study. During qualitative research, it may become apparent that other forms of data from other groups of people should be included into the study. For instance, let's say that a researcher is studying college students' experience trying to eat healthy on campus. Originally, the researcher has planned to just interview a bunch of students. But let's say that during the interviews, the students keep talking about the ice cream area of the cafeteria and student union. How there's over 400 kinds of ice cream and you have to walk around the ice cream to get to the apples and on about the ice cream bar. Well, the researcher hears enough students talk about this crazy ice cream bar that the researcher decides that observational data should be included in the study. She needs to see the ice cream bar for herself and see how it overshadows the apple bin. She needs to see why everyone's talking about this crazy ice cream bar. So the research design emerges and different kinds of data might be collected as the study goes on. The data for quantitative research is in the form of numbers. These numbers usually come from what people check off on instruments, which are surveys or questionnaires, or observational checklists and so on. So qualitative research looks at words, quantitative research looks at numbers. Let's talk about analysis. In qualitative research, analysis is all about creating themes. Researchers read their interviews, look at documents, observations, and audiovisual materials, and then they organize all of that data, all of those words, into themes. This can take a considerable amount of time. There are often pages and pages of interview transcripts to read. For example, let's say a researcher interviewed students about their experience eating healthy on campus. From the interview, there were over 80 pages of interview text to read. From those pages, the researcher was able to group the data or analyze the data, group it into three major themes, which were students believed that there was a lack of healthy options on campus, the students believed the healthy options were too expensive, and they felt that unhealthy options were just too tempting. It's important to note here that qualitative research is inductive in nature. That means that the research questions, the data collection, the analysis, and all that stuff is not based off of a theory or preconceived notions that the researcher has. The researcher lets the data speak for itself, inform itself into themes without the bias of an existing theory or existing ways of thinking about things already. On the other hand, in quantitative research, analysis involves the use of statistics to crunch numbers and figure out what those numbers mean in terms of answering a research question. Qualitative research looks at themes, quantitative research and analysis crunches numbers, statistics. Quantitative research is also usually deductive. It's based from existing theories and information that's already out there to help form research questions and how data is collected and how it's analyzed. Let's talk about the final report. In qualitative research, the final report is usually narrative in nature. The authors will sometimes write in the first person. It's more interpretive, and it contains a lot of writing, and it has direct quotes from participants. The final reports for quantitative research are more rigid in form, and it's more in the form of a statistical report. In conclusion, there are noteworthy differences between qualitative and quantitative research in terms of their purpose, research questions, data analysis, and so on. And this video is just an intro to each style of research. We're going to go into way more depth as the semester continues with each form of research. So thanks for a great journey, and I'll see you in class.
Okay, there are differences between qualitative and quantitative research, but do remember that qualitative is related to words, quantitative is related to statistics, to numbers, and mixed method is both qualitative and quantitative as an integration of the two. The qualitative and the quantitative debate originally this dominates use of quantitative research in social science, but it has been challenged by emergent qualitative methodologies. In the past, usually social science used quantitative research method, but now there's more use of qualitative methodologies. Both of them are different, but they are equally vital, and they are important aspects of social research. Both have strong points and both have weak points. And very often, if time and resources allow, we use both so that there's triangulation of data. Different research methods, qualitative and quantitative, have different strengths. The quantitative, it is generalizable. For example, if the sample is well drawn, you can predict the population situation. For qualitative research, it is rich in meaning, but usually the sample is small and it may not be generalizable, but it is transferable to similar cases. Very often we combine quantitative and qualitative research method. We have mixed research method. Now we watch a video on mixed research method.
You from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln in the United States. I am in the Department of Educational Psychology, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about what is mixed methods research. This will just be a short video presentation. I've been working in the field of mixed methods research for almost 25 years. I co-founded the Journal of Mixed Methods Research, established a research office here. I've written textbooks on mixed methods research, and I've been teaching it for almost 20 years now. So I'm just going to kind of run through some of the basic ideas of flip points about what mixed methods research is. And hopefully you'll find this informative and educational and learn a little bit about mixed methods research. We might start with the broader question of what kind of evidence do we use to study the problems today in the social sciences and education and the health sciences. I think we can draw some clues from looking at recent documentaries. Take, for example, Al Gore's documentary, Inconvenient Truth. And this is a documentary, of course, about global warming. But you look at the documentary, it's a mixed methods documentary, because Al Gore combines books of stories as well as statistical trends. For example, he shows some pictures of how glaciers have changed over time and talks about that story of change over the years. And then on the next slide, he's showing us some graphs, some pictures of how these changes have occurred. We can find it both in the sporting world today when we look at the evidence. For example, there was this well-known basketball player in the United States, Shane Battier. He was as a seventh grader, fourth best in the nation. He graduated from high school. He was considered the best. He went on to a very illustrious college career. Now, when it comes to the professional basketball realm and people began looking at his statistics on how he performed, he didn't score many points, he didn't really snag many rebounds, he struck a few balls, he dipped out a few assists, but yet his team was winning. But then, when they started bringing in qualitative information, such as looking at how he blocked the opponent's vision, how he looked at whether the player drove left or right, whether he talked to teammates and how he talked to teammates, we get the qualitative evidence that begins to supplement or augment the statistical evidence to have a greater understanding of Shane's potential. We see those two in everyday events that are portrayed in the media, such as the stories about Hurricane Sandy in New York City, where we get the passionate, tragic stories of individuals who've lost property and some have lost lives. And those are presented alongside the newscasters that show the statistics about Hurricane Sandy and give us the numeric information. So again, the story and numbers being portrayed in the media. This leads to mixed methods research, which in the simplest way of thinking about it is just simply putting together the stories of people's lives as well as the numbers, the statistics of what occurs. The mixed methods approach in the social and health sciences, it combines both the statistical trends and the stories. People have developed a complete methodology around this concept. The whole idea is that combining both the statistics as well as the stories gives us a more complete understanding of our research problem than just one by itself. So I want to go through now 4 key features that really illustrate to me what mixed methods is all about. First of all, it's collecting and analyzing both qualitative and quantitative data, using rigorous approaches in collecting those methods, combining the 2 forms of data, and then perhaps framing it within a broader framework. And what I'm going to do now is take each one of these 4 points and I'm going to break them down and talk about them specifically. It's helpful to beginning to think about what mixed methods is not, because there's a lot of commentary out there about what mixed methods is, what it is not. Here's some of my thoughts about what it's not. It's not simply just using the name mixed methods without the more rigorous procedure. In research methodology, people do that. They drop in the terms such as grounded theory, but they really don't have the rigorous procedure behind it. It's more than just having both quantitative and qualitative data available. It's also more than just gathering the forms of data and analyzing them separately without bringing them together. Also, it's not just gathering multiple forms of qualitative data or multiple forms of quantitative data. There's a term for that in the literature called multi-method research. So now I want to go through these 4 points. First of all, what does it mean to collect and analyze both qualitative and quantitative data? We need to view data as part of a larger picture of doing research. It's the type of information we gather and analyze to answer our questions. It's then framed within larger questions and framed within larger philosophical assumptions of doing research. So my focus is going to be on how we treat that data, how we combine it and integrate it in mixed methods research. But we need to recognize it as part of a larger approach to doing research. It's just one step in the process. Now, when you look at quantitative data and qualitative data, there are certain different assumptions that are operating. 2 different forms of gathering evidence. Quantitative data is usually predetermined by the researcher. It's based on instruments. We gather those instruments measuring performance, attitudes, observations. We then do statistical analysis and we make an interpretation. Qualitative has a different type of methods going on. It's an emerging methods where we don't necessarily start with a predetermined instrument. We ask very open-ended questions. We often conduct interviews, observations. We look at documents. We might look at email messages. We might listen to sounds. The range of qualitative methods that are collected, data that's collected is very broad. Then we take that information and we analyze it. I say we analyze text or image data. And we build a picture of what themes or patterns emerge from talking to people. So I see the methods for quantitative and qualitative being very different and having distinct features. Now both methods have advantages. Take quantitative research, for example. It's really useful for studying large numbers of people across a wide geographic area. It's a very efficient method of data collection. We can start looking at the relationship among concepts or variables. We can even look at whether something causes something, cause and effect. We can control it for bias carefully. And people tend to like numbers. But we also know that the downside to quantitative research. It tends to be impersonal, dry. We really don't hear the words of participants. Often we don't go out to the actual setting where things are occurring. It's not written by the researcher. Now, qualitative research has some distinct advantages too. We can hear those detailed voices of people. We can understand their experiences and their actual settings where things are occurring. Your whole idea in qualitative is to build the perspective up from the views of participants, not from the researcher's perspective. So it's more realistic. And people like stories. Some of the limitations, well, it often draws on small samples, so we can't really apply it across a large number of people. It's also highly interpretive, and it also relies on the researcher's interpretation to make sense of these stories that individuals provide. So mixed methods, secondly, is rigorous. Well, what constitutes a rigorous quantitative study and a rigorous qualitative study? We need to attend to different perspectives about design, such as using a design procedure. In quantitative, this would mean an experiment or correlation or survey, whereas in qualitative, it might mean using a design such as a ethnography, a grounded theory, phenomenological study. We also need to attend to how we collect the data from sites, permissions, a systematic or a purposeful sampling, an adequate N or number of people that we study. We need to have multiple forms of data collection. We need to go through a rigorous procedure analysis of the information, whether it's statistical analysis, such as descriptive, inferential, using statistical packages, or on the qualitative side, whether it's using a qualitative software package, and then building from the codes to the themes to the larger perspectives. So we need some rigorous methods when we do mixed methods research, and that gives it more of a scientific form. And this is maybe one of the most important and one of the most confusing parts of mixed methods research. We need to integrate these two forms of data. We need to bring the qualitative and the quantitative together. Now, there are some designs out there in the mixed methods field that have emerged, and these have developed over maybe the last 20 years. The first one we call a convergent design. Basically, what we're going to do here is we're going to collect quantitative data, analyze it, and at the same time we're going to collect qualitative data and analyze it. So quantitative might be a survey, but qualitative might be an open-ended interview with some people. We're going to get rid of these two databases, and then we're actually going to merge the data, bring it together. And basically, we're going to compare the results to see when we ask people questions and talk to them, as in qualitative, and we gather information on instruments, whether the results from these two databases merge and are comparable. That's a convergent design. The next is an explanatory sequential design. It's a very popular one in the social sciences and health sciences. We're going to start by collecting quantitative data, analyzing it, and then from those results, we're then going to build in a second qualitative phase where we follow up. So the whole idea in this design is to interpret the quantitative results using the qualitative data. Now, to reverse this, and we have an exploratory design where we're going to start not quantitatively, but we're going to start qualitatively. So we start with the quantitative data collection, we explore and come up with findings. We then use those findings to then follow up with the quantitative phase. For example, we might use qualitative findings to develop a new instrument because there aren't existing instruments out there to measure a certain phenomenon with a population. So this is a good design for that. So I call it qualitative exploration and leading to a quantitative test. Now,
okay, in mixed method research, we do not just collect qualitative data and quantitative data. We should integrate them. For example, in your research design, you have two stages. The first stage is that you have in-depth qualitative interview. You collect qualitative information, and the information you collected, you help you to design a questionnaire for the second stage. And then you have the conducting of the questionnaire to collect quantitative data. You need to integrate them, or you reverse it. First, you have a survey, have a questionnaire to collect quantitative data. And then for the respondent, you ask them, are you interested in joining our in-depth interview? If you are interested, please give us your contact telephone number and we'll contact you later. For those who are interested, you may contact them later for in-depth interview to get more information. There are two stages. When you are conducting your capstone, you can also have two stages of data collection. The first may be qualitative, and then the second may be quantitative. And when you collect data, when you present the findings can be integrated. For example, you have certain statistics showing that there's a relation between age and home ownership. And then you interview some participants, some interviewees, to say that, oh, when I was young, I have no money to pay for the down payment. I save a long time before I get I get enough money for down payment. When I buy my first home, I was already 40. When you reach middle age before you can have home ownership because of the down payment. And then you can use the quotation from the interview to support your quantitative data. And then this is the integration of qualitative and quantitative in the research design and in the presenting of the findings. You do not just separate them. You try to find information that is complementary to each other, findings that are complementary to each other. And then you use them to illustrate your case. Okay? That is mixed method research. Selecting a research method. All social science research methods are valid. All have their strengths and their weaknesses. All have their value. Some researchers have certain preference. For example, you have a science background, you are good at statistics, you prefer quantitative research methods. But some of the, maybe girls, they are good at talking with each other. They are good at being an interviewer. They prefer qualitative research methods. Some researchers may have preference, and you may adapt the research method to suit your background. And there can be triangulation of method. You use different research methods so that the information can be complementary and supporting each other. You do not rely on one source of information. For a research question, you have different consideration of finding a research method. From the social science perspective, it is better not to just use one research method to collect information. You use 2 or 3 research methods. But this has implication. It has implication on time and money. And you need to consider the resource perspective. You do not have enough time and money to use more than one research method. Then you may need to stick to one research method. And the practical perspective. For example, you would like to work on a topic on gay people. And gay people do not want you to identify themselves. You may only get to know a few or get referrals from those organizations serving gay people. You cannot have a lot of respondents. Maybe you cannot use survey. Maybe you just have an in-depth interview of about 20 to 30 cases. Because of practical perspective, some of the sampling may not be feasible, or you have no more sampling. Start with a few friends, you know that they are gay, and ask them to refer further cases to you. And then after interviewing the second round, you ask them to refer further cases. Snowball, the ball gets bigger and bigger. And there are practical perspective of social science research method. You cannot get a large sample. Maybe you do qualitative in-depth interview, do 20 to 30 cases instead. Social science consideration. You try to find the most rigorous way of answering the research question. Very often, it is desirable to use more than one research method to collect data. But using more than one research method involves money and time. And do you have enough money and time? There are practical considerations. Is the method feasible for the research question? For certain research questions, it is difficult to find participants, and maybe survey may not be feasible. You need to have qualitative in-depth interview to have a small sample. And your personal experience, based on your training. For example, some of you are well trained in statistics, you are comfortable with using quantitative data, but some people like to use qualitative data because of their training. Resource consideration. From a social science perspective, it is desirable to have more than one method, but because of the budget, because of the resources and the time, we cannot do what is ideally desirable. We need to do some compromise. If the budget is small, maybe we just use the money to do a few qualitative in-depth interview instead of a large-scale survey. The audience, if the audience is secondary school students do not like a lot of words. If your target is secondary school students, they may like to have graphs, bar charts, some statistics to show the answer. The audience, you need to consider the audience. When in the academic world, some journals prefer qualitative research methods, some prefer quantitative, the readers, the colleagues in the field, and the advisor. Types of research design. We watch your video.
To go about studying the speeding rate of drivers in red cars or the speeding rate of my blender on frappe. We've got to figure out how to observe the effects of the independent variable upon the dependent variable. And guess what? We're in serious luck. We've got 5 choices to choose from, 5 types of study designs to whet your appetite.
The 5 most widely accepted research design types are surveys, interviews, experiments, observation and participant observation, and secondary data analysis.
First, a sample is a subset of a larger group. Basically, a sample represents a population of something. Sampling can be done either methodically or randomly. Methodical sampling is the conscious choosing of your subset members. Random sampling is sampling among a group of subjects where all subjects have equal chances of being chosen.
The first research method to consider is the survey. A survey is a questionnaire distributed to a specific group of people in order to find out something about them. A survey is a good way to study a large sample of people. The questions in the survey tend to be rather specific because the survey is meant to get as much precise information as possible. Information collected in a survey may include basic demographic facts like sex, race, and income, or more complicated issues like drug use, bathroom habits, or your favorite real-world character.
The second research design is the interview. This is the gist. Somebody interviews somebody else about a particular subject or subjects.
The third type of research design is the experiment. An experiment is when a hypothesis is tested in a controlled environment.
The fourth type of research design is observation and participant observation.
An example of observation is when a sociologist studies the group dynamics of a group of teens without speaking or interacting with them in any way. The researcher tries to be as unobtrusive as possible.
Participant observation is when a researcher has direct contact with the activities being studied. The researcher is actively engaged in what is being studied and observed. This contact can be very intense, or it can vary in degrees.
In participant observation, a sociologist lives or works with the group or community being studied. This method can produce rich results and unexpected findings. However, only a relatively small group of people can be studied at one time.
The fifth and last type of research design is called secondary data analysis. Secondary analysis, or content analysis, is when you use the data collected by others in order to test your hypothesis. Examples of secondary data are rates.
Official data, like information collected by the government, such as census reports and documentary analysis, or information from written words like newspapers, magazines, and poems, or information retrieved from visual and or audio data, such as television shows, movies, and radio broadcasts.
So those are the 5 types of research design possibilities: surveys, interviews, experiments, observation and participant observation, and secondary analysis.
Well, we've told you about 2 steps of the research process. 1, selecting and framing the hypothesis, and 2, designing the study. But those are not the only steps we have to climb. There are 3 more steps to the research process, and we're going to tell you about them.
These last steps, which we will barely give the time of day to, are 3, collecting the data, 4, analyzing the data, and 5, reporting and presenting your findings.
Put simply, in step 3, you actually perform the research design you've chosen.
In step 4, you look at the data you've collected and see if it supports your hypothesis. Then in step 5, you present your conclusions. The conclusions would be that either the data supports the hypothesis, or the data doesn't support the hypothesis, or the data is inconclusive. But each of these steps does get complicated because they tend to deal in numbers and even statistics. We don't want to get too bogged down by this stuff, so we're going to keep on rolling down the tracks of sociology.
Grammar.
There are different research methods. For example, survey and questionnaire. Questionnaire can be self-administered. You give the questionnaire to the participant, and then he fill in the questionnaire and give you back the questionnaire. Or through telephone, you phone the participant and ask him to answer the question, and you key in the answer into your computer. Online questionnaire, you distribute the link to the participant and they fill in the online questionnaire. Face-to-face interview to administer the questionnaire. For example, you go to the MTR station, in mainland is the subway station, and then you ask some of them to fill in the questionnaire. You ask the question, and then they give the answer, and then you key it into the Google form. In Hong Kong, we use Google form, and there are other platforms in mainland to key in the questionnaire. That means you ask a question, and the respondent gives you the answer, and then you key into your notebook computer or your mobile phone. Face-to-face interview to administer the questionnaire. In-depth interview. It is one-to-one with an interviewer and an interviewee. It may be quite long, usually 1 hour, and usually you have audio recorded it so that you can have information that you can quote in your report. You have what the interviewee said about certain things you find interesting, you quote it in your report. Okay? Observation or participant observation. For observation, for example, there are demonstrations in Hong Kong, and you go to the demonstration and you participate in the demonstration and you observe all those demonstrators, how they behave. They are putting up banners, shouting slogans, and are they very enthusiastic or are they very quiet and orderly? You observe the behavior of the people, usually in the public. For example, observing those demonstrators in a demonstration. Focus group, you invite 5 to 8 members to join a group to discuss a topic. There are group dynamics. For example, they may agree on certain ideas after discussion, or they become very polarized after discussion. Usually it is audio recorded. Experiments. You have the pre-test and the protest. For example, pre-test, you measure the happiness of a person, the emotional status of a person before watching a movie. The pre-test. And the movie is a sad movie. After watching the sad movie, you have a protest to measure the happiness of the participant. You have the pre-test and the protest in the experiment to compare the answer before and after watching the sad movie. You have an experimental group and a control group. For the control group, they do not watch the movie, the sad movie. They may be watching a documentary on scenic spots instead of sad movies. And then for experiments, you need to consider the ethics because you are doing experiment on people. You need to consider the ethics. Is the movie too provocative? Is it giving too much stress to the participant? You need to think about it, and then you need to ask for informed consent. they know what they are going to involve in the experiment, and then they consent, they agree to do it, and you need to think about the ethics. Unobtrusive research, that is, you do the research without affecting the social behavior. For example, if you conduct in-depth interview, you are affecting the behavior of the people. They need to join your interview. If you are conducting focus group, they need to come to join your focus group. You study social behavior and you are affecting them. They need to discuss about certain views. But unobtrusive research, you are studying social behavior without affecting it. For example, content analysis is one of the unobtrusive research. You study recorded human communications. You do not affect behavior. You're reading magazines, speeches, songs, newspaper, letters, and you're examining certain concepts. For example, you look at newspaper for 1 year, 2 newspaper, how they portray the concept of home in newspaper. You're not affecting social behavior, you're just reading newspaper articles. It is unobtrusive research. Analyzing existing statistics, for example, census data, you are not affecting social behavior, you're reading statistics. Okay, we have a break for 10 minutes, come back at 3:15 and we continue.
10 minutes break， 这个说了好几遍了，别听啥，最清楚的，总是重复这句话，那么就清楚了。
For those who still do not have a group, you form a group and email the teaching assistant. If you do not have a group by the deadline, I think the deadline is the 9th of September, we will assign you to a group. And if they are new students joining the class, if the total number is in the group, we will assign
大家，不是啊，不对呀，我9元齐了，一个人给1个月费，怎么可能呢？哎，那什么，那个罗亚琪一会儿到了，他已经到那个外面了。可以。困了，我也有点困了。强效切切。来不来？哎，走吧。我也有点困了。哟，哎，确实管用。来吧，别。上次我一颠，我跑到眼里边去了。哎呦，这个痛。你俩来吧。有没有困啊？出来的隔离的，啊，昨天发现头一天，我今天在图书馆来着。是我刚刚就是本来在图书馆然后就是经过你的提问，然后我就在外面上了才发现。那我一直听错了。我不敢进来，哎，对，我没注意他标一标，他课表上写的是1306。刚才我们在那等半天，我说没有人，也一直关着门，还里边也黑着灯。我说今天不上课了。然后后来去那问问，说是那个改成1301。这都是1301。 那我为什么课表上是1306呢？啊？啊？我这为啥你是1301啊？有2个，一个是1301，不就一个？哎？那这个我是用的。这个其实可以要求。那3个吧。好几个我在那等，找不着。这3、4个。怎么会等半天，然后也没来？也是等不了。然后后来我看那个课本上也没有。我。你要加入我们队啊？你这是缺呀！加入我们的队伍就强大了，说的加入我们队伍就强大了。
还没有看那个奥奇，看完了。
今天下午1点刚刚。啊。
太冷了。
下午那个是不是2节吗？6点1节，然后那个8点1节。上次不也是6点那个是中午上班，后边啊？当学霸不就跟上学霸吗？咱4个学习迷茫，一看就是迷茫。我虽然学习好，但是我其实态度是好。我去，你问这话感觉我说咱4个谁学习比较好？问这话，你问这话谁敢？你看这个架势，你看这个才华，你看就是。你看我每天我都去做那个叫什么翻译啊？不是翻译啊，我听不出来，然后我就提前翻译。学习比较好。不是，但是我是只能是翻译到这种程度。其他的不是那老师讲的一些那个什么重点，然后留作业呀什么的，就比如说那个你像以前上学不是有课代表吗？然后讲完课之后，他会总结这一课讲什么重点，然后放在里边留什么作业，留什么注意的。
没有反对，没有，没有叫反对。
以前上课不是有吗？没有。他来了，我刚才他说过了。不是你那课代表吗？你叫吴志良吗？啊？你不是吴志良吗？
没有脑子的人。
现在要说等一下，可能要离队了。因为我听不太懂，所以说我怕就是漏点什么重要的东西。有你在还能弄到什么这样的东西？你就是最重要的。但是我现在也录下来了，我回去会给他翻译过来。给我们也翻译。但是这种是没有你录直译，什么录下来的？不会啊，是吧？对啊，但是它是通过那个什么 YouTube 上面翻译的，它跟那种Zoom 上有啊。
左的思想正的思想，
他没有录。
哦，这样啊。我以为只要上这里都会有。对啊，就是那天上那个上次动的，这好像只有。
那更得记一下。下午那两个不用去教室了是吧？
我不知道，
你没这课吗？
我应该用上次这种课。
对，上次是那个线上嘛，然后第二节课是不是去线下来着？没上。
左翼属于积极的，右翼属于保守的。关键是一个人要挑战3个人。
你还没组队呢。6个课嘛，一共。有选修，对，有选修。选修也组啊，选修也组啊。组好了吧？组好了。那你看哪个没组？
最后几个我就觉得他已经至少可以上个发言条。
学霸，一般戴眼镜的就是学霸，是吧？你摘下来呀？他这课其实还好一点，因为他的一些东西都是可以直接复制下来的，然后我就补个1年贴，我就能翻译过来了嘛。但是有些那个他是全锁定的，我一个字一个字去敲，哎妈，什么东西？不是搜那什么吗？那个
上次元宝
看新闻那个。
玉阳那个要看上面文章。
哦，那看文章那个没了。明天开始交了。行，那今天晚上得加班了。
Okay, we continue. After talking about research design, we talk about research conceptual framework. Okay, what can you see? What forms the painting? Think about it, discuss with your groupmate. Ask one group to share with us your views. What can you see? What forms the picture? What forms the picture?
什么做出来的图片
Okay, group 1, where are you? Group 1.
我是谁
Group 1. 圈七七烟加西顾问生章鱼生。
咱那有提了吗？
What can you see? What forms the picture?
还好。对呀，他这好像还得分有一次认组，还得分2次。对呀。
但是那个学校下午吧，主要学校讲的。
I beg your pardon. Can you repeat louder? You can't figure out. No idea. What can you see? What can you see? This picture. What can you see? What can you see? What can you see from this picture? Okay, group 2, where are you? Group 2, what can you see?
幸亏咱没提交，我还没提交，我还没提呢。
Where are you? Yeah. What can you see?
哎，哪有那个？
A woman with big eyes. Why can you get the idea of a woman? Because of the shape and the color. The shape of the face. Why do you get the idea of the face? Because they are shading here. They are shading here. You get the idea of a face. And they are shapes and black and white color, so that you know that it is like a woman. But actually, what forms the picture? The shape, the color, the black and white, the gray color gives the picture. But the picture needs a paper, needs a canvas, needs a cloth for you to draw the paper. What forms the painting? The canvas, the cloth, the paper also forms the picture. The color needs to be painted on a paper, on a cloth, on a canvas. The painting canvas, the cloth, or the paper that the picture is painted on also forms part of the picture. Without the canvas, without the cloth, without the paper, the picture cannot be drawn. The canvas is not part of the painting itself, but it is an essential entity of the picture. It is the foundation of all other elements. Without the cloth, without the canvas, without the paper, the picture cannot be painted. A conceptual framework works in the same way in a research, similar to canvas of a painting, similar to a cloth of the painting. The conceptual framework is an essential entity, essential elements, is a foundation for other elements in the research. Conceptual framework is the overall worldview. It is defined by values and perception. It is a sum of one's experience, beliefs, and knowledge in every facet of life. The worldview underlies the research, underlies the conceptual framework. For example, gender, your religious beliefs, your family, your political, social, academic, and environmental arenas underlies the worldview and underlies the conceptual framework of your research. It can partly explain the decision of the researcher. For example, the researcher is a female and she is sensitive to gender discrimination, and she chose the topic of gender discrimination in the workplace. It guides what you notice and don't notice. The female researcher is sensitive to gender discrimination in the workplace. She noticed that there's gender discrimination and she worked on this research topic. You can make your implicit framework explicit. You make it explicit. What are your assumptions, your worldview in your research? Once explicit, we can deliberately consider other frameworks. We know that you are viewing it from a female perspective. We may look at other research that look at gender discrimination from other perspectives. Conceptual framework, an example. For example, the research question. Last lesson we talked about research question. The first thing you do for doing research is to design a research question. The research question for this research is, how are gay people discriminated in Hong Kong? What improvement can be made? This research question makes the assumption that discrimination is something bad and equality is good, because it tries to look at improvement, what improvement can be made. It implies that discrimination is something bad. And it assumes discrimination against gay people in Hong Kong exists, because it looks at how are gay people discriminated. It assumes that discrimination against gay people exists in Hong Kong. The research method used in this research is in-depth interviews with gay people and lesbian people. It emphasizes the meaning are given by individuals. Listen to individual gay and lesbian people's perspective. You conduct in-depth interviews, you try to view from the perspective of gay and lesbian people. You want to listen to individuals' point of view. And then you also conduct focus group with different people of different religion, how they view homosexuality. In conducting focus group with religious people, you assume that many religious people are against homosexuality. Why do you do focus group with religious people? Why do you not do focus group with rich people, with middle class people? Why do you do focus group for believers of different religion? Because you assume that religious people are against homosexuality. And you hope to facilitate dialogue between religious people and gay people, improve their understanding, bring improvement. And this is your research design. Sometimes conceptual framework can be used interchangeably with theoretical framework. You read this example. I'll give you some time to read this example. Yes or no? No. Finish? Yes. Okay, look at the words in red. The diffusion of innovation theory. A theory was used as the conceptual framework of the study. The conceptual framework can be based on a theory. And in this case, this is the diffusion of innovation theory was used as the conceptual framework of the study. Okay, a conceptual framework can be the same as a theoretical framework. It may be a theory. And in this case, it is the diffusion of innovation theory. Okay? Okay, and then we continue. Another example of using a theory in a research question is how do people use Facebook for political engagement in Hong Kong? And what are the assumptions? Is that it assumes that there are at least some people who use Facebook for political engagement in Hong Kong. Because the question asks how do people use Facebook for political engagement? At least some people use Facebook for political engagement. That's why this research question is meaningful. The theory used is the time displacement theory. What is time displacement theory? According to the time displacement logic, political engagement and participation will be displaced and replaced by time spent in front of computer. That means if you use more time in front of the computer, you do not have time for political engagement and participation. This theory assumes that there's traditional forms of political engagement. For example, voting, demonstration. And if you have more time in front of the computer, you have less time to go to voting and less time to go to demonstration. It assumes that traditional forms of political engagement are the only possible and available ones. The research findings rebuilt the time displacement theory. What are the findings? The findings is that Facebook and the internet by itself can be a new form of political engagement. That means you spend more time in front of the computer, you use Facebook for political engagement, and then the more time you spend on the computer, the more time you spend on political engagement. It is a new form of internet political engagement. For example, you can use the Facebook to spread your political ideas, use Facebook to organize demonstration, use Facebook to influence others' opinion on political issues. Conclusion drawn from research findings is that Facebook political engagement implies more time spent on Facebook, and time spent on Facebook may be compatible with political engagement. This research finds out that Facebook by itself can be a type of political engagement. The time spent in front of the computer can imply the time spent on political engagement, because internet and Facebook can be a form of political engagement. And it rebuilt the time displacement theory. The time displacement theory said that the more time you spend on computer, the less time for political engagement. But this research rebuilt the time displacement theory. The more time you spend in front of the computer implies the more time you can use Facebook and internet for political engagement. And Facebook can be a form of new type of political engagement. And this is theoretical framework as conceptual framework. You try to test a theory and you rebuild the theory. The conceptual framework is ever expanding. Research itself can impact on one's worldview, because one's worldview will be affected by one's research experience and research finding. The more research you conduct, your worldview will be changing. For example, a researcher, before conducting research, thinks that home ownership is something good. After interviewing some elders who live in public rental housing in Hong Kong, the public rental housing elders are very satisfied with their housing. Even though it is rental, they are stable and the rent is low. The researcher worldview changes. He noticed that living in rental housing, public sector, is also good. And home ownership may not be the only desirable tenure to be pursued by all. There may be elders who are satisfied with living in public rental housing. And this research findings affect the worldview of the researcher, and it will affect his design of the next research project. One's worldview is evolving and it changes with research experience. Now you download question 1, download the worksheet 1, and then work on question 1 on worksheet 1 with your groupmate. And you can get paper on the table if you need. You download worksheet 1 and work on worksheet 1. Number 1 on worksheet 1. Question 1. Please think of a research question related to housing or urban studies, or housing or urban management. Please find appropriate research method to conduct the research. Please identify conceptual framework. You can draw a diagram if necessary to illustrate. Please identify a theory in social science related to your research question. This lays the theoretic framework in your research. Are you able to download worksheet 1? Yes. If you need paper, you can get paper there. Discuss with your groupmate about question 1.
Question 1它是指 A 呀还是全 A B C D 呀？全部，没写完呢都。
写完了？
没写完呢。
你写的还挺快。
不是我这上回就在图书馆了吗？啊？没事，我们讨论过。啊？都可以讨论是吗？就是前面就是找一个问题，这个好找吗？对吧？就它 A B C D， 先第一步先是找一个问题嘛，然后再找它那个相关的这个研究方法，然后它下面的第3个那是什么呀？第3个是研究的那个框架还是什么呀？
对呀。
不是有吗？然后先提一个问题，然后做出假设，然后最后调查那个表格，我只是那样去。
哪个样式的表格？就刚才的是，就这个表格。
Have you all signed the attendance sheet?
I haven't.
笔呀，快点想，放书包里面啊？上学都不带笔，上学都不爱带着笔，没带笔了。
of research question indicates 可以要用一个合适的方法去 conduct。
对啊，就先有一个主题呗。我现在找的是一个那个什么的，就是城市中心是否会影响到这个居民的这种居住平衡。就是不是就是最简单的嘛，就是城市更新什么呀？就是我把那个这块那个原住民拆掉，给他那个还迁到更远的地方，然后我这个项目才能挣钱。那么这时候这些人在这儿出行，可能需要换上。
确实有点复杂。虽然我知道城市会不会导致指数失衡，肯定是会的。
对，
因为他那个城市更新，把那些更新之后
原住民
走
了，
然后负担得起的人
才
走进来。
对。所以
他就是说，就是那些乘用车，每个乘用车，然后更新之后，会不会导致它的一个指数失衡？因为乘用车作为是低收入的人群，然后他这帮人迁走了之后，那人
对他上班的时候就会远了嘛，对啊，
就不能在一个区，
就不是只对。
比如你想。
没有清一是什么？
他刚才那个例子
就是那个 gay people 有航考
gay people concept 不是这个吧？
啊？
他说的是 conceptual 是这个吧？对啊，是这个。这个哎，2页嘛。
这个。
对啊，它是那个
哦 ，How do people use Facebook？
或者就把
那是下一个题吧？那下一页。
我觉得可以讲一些简单一点的，
简单。
太复杂了。
对，或者你们都可以都可以吗？反正好容易说的，对啊。对呀，就是你怎么简单怎么说，因为我是正好看了这篇论文了，所以我写上了。简单的抛条文。现在就是讨论嘛，现在就是讨论嘛。随便搞一个。然后或者就简单一点，就是是不是需要城市更新？这简单了吧？
需不需要
城市更新？这是最简单的了，这就比刚才那简单了。
找一个很适合的
研究方法就是叫什么定性跟定量。
找一些设计出来什么样，就是选一个话题，这个话题如何去研究？
对啊，就是叫什么 interview 嘛。对啊，你可以通过这个城市的人口的水平啊、城镇化的水平去判断它是不是需要城市更新。对，哎，这不就出来了吗？然后有一个概念的一个框架怎么研究？
然后找到合适的研究，其实就是假设就是个人要
他就可以并没有那种
必要性是变化的一个假设，
然后你要
就不是垃圾吗？
就一袋儿每天会消耗多少？
价值就是有价值，还有 value。然后 Worldview 就是为自己确定自己的世界观，它和城市电脑
这样生活更好，人民生活更好。
定性的话，就是需要每个城市的个人去，比如个人调查，然后做的话也大家就是比如说你站在小区那个
树是吹嘛？啊，框架图啊，框架图，就是它这个呗，是这个吗？
就是你是怎么样子三角形？首先要找一个东西，然后指向下一个，就是你研究这个框架的。
现在就要提出来吗？
关键是我们
这有点深奥。这可以 PPT 上就写了吧？是吧？PPT 上就写了吧？
解决你现在垃圾处理问题，然后还有一个 identify a theory， 怎么样 identify？
CMP 啥意思？
不是上海就是立法的，立法的
6修这没写，研究社会科学理论。
搞一个理论。
等会儿简单什么理论？刚才就是提过一个理论，但是城市更新涉及什么理论？
其实上网查一下就好了。这简单，关于香港如何促进香港或者香港是否有必要性？
看啊，那个标题全都是那种黄文字，
随意的想法。
然后深入一下讨论
那第一个
到底第一个就是那个
上来是垃圾分类是因为没有垃圾分类之前，去那个焚烧垃圾发电的时候发生过很多起事故。但是香港有没有焚烧垃圾？感觉这个是不是有点课题太大了，课题太大了。但是好像这是一个小对。现在需要为什么需要媒体这份水是相当来说 states 就是要找一个理论对，然后要放在你的研究框架里面。为什么要是？为什么香港要有什么必要去用？就是现在这个应该是
城市更新的这个必要性，
就是necessary， 就是应该不垃圾分类之前是这个样子，是一个意思。
城市更新必要性是这意思吧？
必要，
或者叫。
还有自己老鼠三号。
到时候
这个是
可能是一些污染性的垃圾，可行性，反正污染性的垃圾会给员工带来一些。
因为最近就是从地方上到这个区域到国家一直在提有城市更新嘛，是最近才开始提的，就这个，就
找一个简单的问题，
对，简单的一点的也行嘛。
简单一点，
还有一些腐蚀性的就是找一些
就是可以具体到人口啊，或者是比较先进学或者比较
我们不用去做出来的，只是讨论，然后
讨论一个问题。
对呀，对。
就是我们可以把问题具体一下，是人口或者是交通啊这种问题。先缩小一下这个范围，比如说人口老龄化问题，这样子。
可以啊，对，你看或者你们看哪个简单，因为我觉得那个时候更新挺简单的。
怎么看待现在中国人口老龄化，或者怎么看待其他一个是香港的人口老龄化？而不只是
对呀，
这个问题有必要解决，为什么要解决？但是我觉得为什么必要解决？然后通过什么方法？对，
就是把范围细小一下，默读不点，
对，所以说
更具体，
一条逻辑顺下来，
就是更具体，或者是交通拥堵。
我觉得要找出一个可以定能量的东西的话，定性的讲法。就你要可以找一个可以定的东西的话，去给它定性的东西。
那就城市更新不能定性吗？你有人口，你有城市化率，然后你有那个城市规模。
你要调查的时候，你要知道这个。
你们数据库都有。You need to set up a research question. Okay, the first thing you need to think about the research question. And then you think about the theoretical or conceptual framework. And then you think about the research method for collecting information. I give you an example of conceptual and theoretical framework. You can draw a diagram to visualize your conceptual or theoretical framework. And this is a theoretical framework that I done for a research proposal. Market failure, the theory of market failure in housing, and the theory of government failure in housing. The overlap area is that the specific groups not catered by both the market and the way, this provides a role for third sector housing to play. Third sector housing is non-profit housing. That means that it is not government and it is not the market, but third sector. The third sector can act as the complement, the supplement, as the way out, as a complement to the government provision of housing. For example, the provision of transitional housing, 過渡性房屋. So that people move into the transitional housing and then move to public rental housing as supplement. For example, those new immigrants are not well catered for by public housing, and then they may be poor and they cannot afford private housing. And third sector housing can act as a supplement to public housing and private housing. And then you can do a diagram like this for your research question. Third sector housing in housing provision, housing management, property agency, housing support services, urban regeneration. These are the activities that third sector housing can involve. Use a block to show it. What are the challenges and opportunities that can affect third sector housing development? The challenges and the opportunities related to the public is whether they are willing to donate property or money to third sector housing organization, whether the public are willing to do voluntary work for third sector housing. For the third sector, the non-profit organization, whether they are willing to diversify from social services to housing services, whether they are willing to innovate. And property sector practitioners and private sector, whether they view third sector as a competitor, and whether they are willing to donate land and money for third sector housing, whether they are willing to offer professional knowledge to third sector housing. The building blocks, there may be three sections: facilitation by the government. The government may provide institutional financial support, public education or facilitation of experience sharing. Continuity. Another building block may be from residue past third sector housing experiences. In Hong Kong, there were some third sector experiences in the past, and then they are crowded out by the public sector. But whether we can learn from past experiences, and whether we can learn from emergent third sector housing experiences. When you are doing your capstone, you can draw a diagram related to your research, and your research may cover these parts that you have highlighted. And I give you another example. For example, desire for home ownership. You have political factors. Social factors. Economic factors. And then when you are designing the questionnaire, you have a few questions related to political, a few questions related to social, a few questions related to economic. And this may be your conceptual framework. You have a diagram to show your conceptual framework, and you cover all aspects in the conceptual framework. The diagram for your capstone, for your research is very important. It is the canvas, the cloth, and the paper underlying the painting. It is the foundation of your research. Okay? You draw a diagram, simple diagram for your capstone research, and you remember to to cover every aspect of your diagram. And when you are setting up interview questions, you also cover the political aspect, the social aspect, and the economic aspect as you conduct interviews. Okay, these are some of the simple examples. The conceptual framework can be implied in the components of the research, or you can explicitly state it. This is better to explicitly state it, especially draw a diagram to illustrate. Where it is relevant and make a difference, it should be stated so that the readers can have better understanding of the research. And you also keep yourself focused. You do not leave out some of the important parts. You do not leave out the social part. You have, when you design the questionnaire, you have a few questions for political, a few questions for social, a few questions for economic. The conceptual framework is the earth that sustains the tree, and the earth is the conceptual framework that sustains the tree, sustains the research. And you cannot live without the earth. The tree cannot live without the earth. A research cannot be done without a conceptual framework. And it may be invisible, but it is very important. It expresses through every part of the tree. And the earth, the conceptual framework, sustains the research, and it is expressed through every part of the research, every part of the tree. The conceptual framework expressed through different research components. For example, your questionnaire design covers every aspect of your conceptual framework. Your interview question covers every aspect of your conceptual framework. You do not leave out every part, any part within the conceptual framework. Okay? There's a kind of subjectivity involved in research decision making. Why do you include political, social, and economic aspect and do not include other aspects, for example, cultural aspect, or you include cultural aspect as a social aspect instead of having a cultural aspect? And you make certain decisions about your conceptual framework. It involves some kind of subjectivity. Okay, the conceptual framework can play a different part in the research. The conceptual framework and the theoretical framework can be a theory that underlies the research, and you try to refute the theory or prove the theory. Or the conceptual framework or the theoretical framework can guide the data analysis and guide the presentation of findings. Or the theory, the theoretical framework, conceptual framework, can guide the literature review. Now we watch a video on conceptual framework.
Section of one of my quantitative research videos, I was asked, how do you support your study relationship based on a theoretical or conceptual framework? That is a great question. There has been a large push from academic institutions and journals in recent years for the explicit use of these frameworks in research studies. Theoretical or conceptual frameworks are used to support research in many ways. More than one framework may even be used in your research. How they guide the development of a research study depends on your question and research design. Sometimes you need to know your theory before you begin your study, and other times it makes more sense to select it after data collection. I always tell my students that the research questions should drive all of the decisions in a study. Keep in mind, however, that sometimes your question actually comes from the theoretical framework. If your research is about testing, confirming, refuting, expanding on, refining, or adding to an existing theory, then you need to be sure you know what it is before the study begins. and I would explain it in the literature review section of your paper. When you get to the results section of that paper, it would likely make sense to organize your results in the same way that the theory is organized. In the discussion section, you can then examine how your results and other literature either support or refute the theory. Sometimes you will not set out to discuss a particular theory. A theoretical or conceptual framework will still be useful to support your question or organize your findings. When using a theory to support your question, the theory needs to relate to the reason why you are doing the study. In Killam and Heerschaft 2012, we used a theory about force field analysis to justify examining student perceptions of challenges to their learning in the clinical setting. Basically, the theory talks about how change occurs when positive forces outweigh negative ones. Therefore, if educators want students to be safe, we need to remove barriers to students practicing safely. In order to remove these barriers, we need to know what they are, and there you have how the theory supported the reason for asking the question. Quite honestly, we added this theory in after the study was completed, because the journal required that we have one. Our selective methodology, however, supported conducting the study without a theoretical frame up front. We developed our own model to explain the findings. The theory did work well with the discussion section that had already been written for the paper. I have done a few qualitative studies where I wanted to examine a topic broadly and have subsequently found a theory that helped me organize and explain the findings. For example, in Killam and Carter 2010, the ecological model was used to organize the findings of a literature review about challenges that student nurses face while on clinical placement in rural settings. We did not select the ecological model as a lens until after the review was completed and we were in the process of analyzing data. You can look at this article for free by clicking on the link below this video. Notice that the ecological model is introduced in the literature review, used in the findings section to organize the collected data, and again in the discussion section. Originally, we had used all the headings from the model in the discussion section, but due to space limitations, we had to condense it. When writing it up, we did link the selection of the framework to the question. You will find that if you select the right framework, the question and findings will fit nicely with it, and the entire paper will flow nicely, making it a high-quality product. If your research is designed to generate a new theory, it would make sense that you don't know what it is before you begin. So, you will want to explain the concepts you're examining in the literature review. In your findings, you would then build the case for your theory based on your study data. Then, in the discussion, you would talk about how pre-existing literature also supports your theory. Another use for theory is to explain the culture of the group being studied or the worldview of the researcher. In qualitative studies, it is useful to know these things when assessing the quality and transferability of the study. Sometimes studies will present a conceptual framework, which may include discussion of multiple views of a particular concept, like in Killam et al. 2012. The entire paper still flows because it is about one topic, but there is no clear pre-existing theory supporting the entire paper. What other ways have you seen theoretical or conceptual frameworks used to support study relationships? Do you think journals should require a theoretical framework in publications? Why or why not? Please share your views below. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you want to be up to date.
Okay, a theoretical framework and conceptual framework is important for your research. Usually you have a kind of theory for your research to design the theoretical framework and the conceptual framework. The theoretical framework and the conceptual framework can underlie the theory you want to prove or the theory you want to rebuild with your research. Or the theoretical framework can guide your literature review, or the theoretical framework can help you to organize the research findings, or your research try to make up a theory, and you start without a theory, and you try to generate a theory. And there's a relation between theory and research. Okay, download worksheet 2 and discuss with your group about question 2 and 3. and we'll ask some of the groups to share the answer. Download question worksheet 2 and work on question 2 and 3. And on page 3, there's a reading. Also take some time to read it before you do question 2. Before you do question 3. Are you able to download the worksheet?
Yes.
Discuss with your group members.
信个人通过什么方式
And I'll
使用
ask some of the
Facebook
groups to
参与政
share
治？
with us your answer.
这个意思。
请针对以下研究的课题提出适当的研究设计和研究方法，并证明你的回答是合理的。这是要提出研究设计和研究方法，是意思吗？是这意思吗？就是你要针对这个，不是说针对这个问题设计这个研究的，就是研究设计和研究方法。
对。
那这怎么设计？
就是首先要
研究设计，我这题都没看，刚翻译过来。Research 研究方法就是那个什么定性定量呗，是吧？研究设计呢？
定量以后去告诉他应该
从哪这个方面就细化一点。
网上调查还是什么？对。
那就给他写一下呗。就是他，你投一个。
首先要看看他要怎么。
看那个 PPT 27页有一个表格，他问的是3种的我看词的对应就是提示嘛，然后然后这个问题嘛，为什么在香港怎么这个感觉也可以用那种快餐料是否，因为这个问题就是想简单化，就是可以问你是否然后你可以采用一个问卷调查的方式。
是假设一下它是怎么样的。去公园儿。就是做一个 research 的先是有前期，然后前期设计怎么样去做，就是写假设还有什么，然后中间然后再决定用什么方式，然后做出来，然后怎么去分析它，然后再得结论，然后最后
有一个框架，然后再往里面填。
对。这设计是不是就是这个框架？
对，这个设计，就是设计的框架。In what ways do Hong Kong people use Facebook？ 那首先要知道它有什么方式才行。那假设它是有什么方式，然后就是可能是评论，就是他刚刚说有时候可能是评论，有时候可能直接发表观点，直接用Facebook话，有可能去搞一些投票，
去投票，对。
就你要写假设它有这么多方式，然后再去让他
分析它
再给一些方法，给它定量。
假设有什么方式呢？现在有投票，有提问，还有什么？
发表观点，直接发表观点。
直接发表不是评论吗？
评论是评论人家的，现在咱们是发表自己的。
哦，可以，这是 posting。
然后这是3种方式。
3种挺好的。
够了，现在3种就够了。
还有 like 一个 like。
对，点赞，对。
然后另外就去抓自己的。
就是到底就是在这段做一个例子，
对吧？
这个。
为然后要包括 people， 要怎么去找这个？
就是在街上看那个 questionnaire 嘛，就是给你一个。
能用到 Facebook 的人，那不是能搞思维的。
那是直接在 Facebook 上就是发起一个 questionnaire，然后发给那些人。
就是要做一个网上的问题。
网上调查。
就是那种投票的方式，4种方式嘛，然后进行一种
就是要一个定性嘛，
就定性的是我也没懂，它是
好像这反正也有数据，
对，
是吧？也有数据，但是好像又不是属于数据。
但是它是定位是一个很指向性很明确的，
就是定性，
那就是定量嘛。定性是那种
逻辑很混乱，
感受型的定性，行为定量，
就可以有
数据东西定量，那就是定量的问题，就是 quantitative， 就是搞一个调查的，用什么方式，然后知道他们就是知道他们的数据有多少人用，用什么方式。就是他在 Facebook 上面用的，哪怕我见了这个上面，就是想这样怎么，就是用什么方式，对啊，就是说什么扩散也好，或者是我发微博，就是把 Facebook 上的微博，直接去微博发成微博，然后搞个微博投票，或者去微博下面评论，或者他
那我们应该怎么回答这个问题？怎么组织一下？
我觉得框架对啊，
就是首先是提出一个问题，就是哪一种？这就是问题嘛。然后我们再提出一个假设。
就咱们现在不是提的那个研究设计吗？
对，现在就是一个问题，然后我们提出4个假设，假设就是现在人们可能用4种方式进行这个 qualitative engagement。
test 吗？他不是刚才有提到过那个 test？
就是在 test 之前。
对，就是在做这个 test 之前，找一堆人考，找那个很好的，就是你大概知道他那个结果会是怎样子，然后你才去做一个测试。就是我觉得是这样，不知道具体怎样子，因为我也没搞过这些。
它主要是让我们说一下 research design 跟 research methods， 就是让我们说明一下我们是怎么做一个调查的设计。
对，现在就是首先一个框架是一个 design， 然后 method 就是 quantitative， 然后去搞一个questionnaire， 之类的嘛，大概这样。
research method 就是一个。
现在就是我们刚才说的绑架，就是首先采访他用什么方式，另外或者是然后
就是一共有几个位是吧？位是什么？所以第一个就是有哪些
方式？对，我们不用提到我们刚才说类似的例子， 显示调查，然后它有多少人，因为你 in what ways 就可能要分析到那些数据类的占百分之比的那些。
对啊，行吧，这先给写一下呗，这第一个题讨论半天了都。这怎么去描述好这个？不是得用英语说呀？对呀，你英语最好啊。
我这半年没受过英语，完全没有碰过英语。
你是海本吗？
真的呀。
那比我们强。
那我们好多天没
不是，我不知道这个要怎么说嘛。首先我们要说，那你说我们是设计成什么样子的呢？
那就是一个面，可以量化一下，或者那个当时interview 一对多或者。
我觉得interview应该是个方式，但是
应该是conduct a survey online survey
对，还有 interview 都是一种调查方法。
对呀。先写呗，先简单写一下呗，咱先把第一题先过了呀。
这第一条问题。
对呀。
那就是第一步做啥，第二步做什么，第三步做什么，对吧？然后第一步我们就是提出问题，然后第二步就是做出一个假设，假设是什么呢？就是有哪些人愿不愿意？
为
刚那个首先注释研究法，
投票简单，每个区域是不一样的，人家区域可能改造发表了够用。
然后第二步是假设，第三个就是确定方法。
这个去叫什么？
确定
研究方法。
研究方法我们采用哪个参数？
定性和定量都用吗？定性就是叫什么 interview， 个人 interview 还有 group interview。
interview 是什么？那个 quantitative，
然后量化的。
online survey 是定性。
结合。
只是一个收集的方式。
对，那是定性的去 interview， 然后那个回来之后再用那个定量去分析，是吧？
定性的去调查，定量的去分析，对吧？
是这意思吗？
定性是一些感受。
别人同学跟我指导，笑得那么开心。
有多少人看到他是在但是这好像有一个。
那我是用定性啊，
但是我觉得这个问题
集合嘛，多找一些数字嘛。
然后最后一步是对，分析数的拆了之后，结合我们的调查问卷或者 interview，
本来就是
然后不是本来这些地方
对，占比嘛，占比嘛，
对，只是做完临时的破裂，
然后频次啊，是吧？
还有总体的人数是多少？男女比例。然后还有什么？
用不同方式，一种方式就不一样的地方。
各个方式。
如果各个方式不是说一个方法一个单位，一个方式也可以。
很大一些方法，完了之后就是报告。
好了，第二个，赶紧。 在多大程度上有公共服务动机，就是怎么不是，关键是就是底下假设他有服务动机，是吧？不是说，因为这个特色我理解的就是说，对于这些卖菜的摊主，也可以就是说我提供多少的薪资对应的我的那个服务动机有多大，这不也私有化，并没有，只是说他上面不是，要是或者是就是指引他没有去有别人去需要有什么服务什么性质上，我才能有提高我的这个服务的动力。
所以这个问题是对，这是两方面的，
是吧？
一个是对待整个社会方面，一个就是小小压力大，大压力。
程度也可以用好、一般、坏，也可以用1、2、3、4、5、6、7、8、9去描述。
没有，其实如果开一个商场，也有可能促进经济的发展，促进购物嘛。
只是说，
信息不会他们在他们那个
Quant是量化的。
Give you 2 more minutes and we'll discuss.
没有，咱一会儿把廊坊跑这个。
还2分钟，他第2题了。
第2题快。就那个学的知识3本是不一样，其他都一样。
对。然后
第2个3题。
第2个没完了吗？第2个。
第2个
假设就是他。叫什么来着？等会儿。就是假设他有这个服务的动机的，但是咱现在评论他是有多大？对，假设他有这动机，然后我们去评论他有多大。
就是来到
反正对，还有通过一些这个对一些
采访的地方干的动这个东西
特别主观了。
最后也不一定要，就是你通过5分、1分、0到5分这样。
行，这20秒完了。第3是啥呀？香港人如何看待香港防务政策表达的正义？就他认为他是正义，因为他是正义的，是吧？假设他是正义的，然后再去找不同的人去采访嘛。
别人不行。
人为因素。
对呀。正常考试问题的这些题目是吧？或者是对，或者还有间接合嘛，还结合考试。第3了，有啊，第3不是第4题呢？不是第4个问题呢？同性恋患者如何看待香港对他们的歧视程度？快是2了。假设他们是对歧视，假设他是歧视，
就是要针对这一部分，就不能海量的出去，包括前面的方法封装5年的时候，也是这个针对这个人才。
那先看3呗，看看3呗。3他是说先看题目，请对以下研究设计发表评论。该研究阶段评估另一个私有化的影响。阅读下一页有关另一个信息。
香港人模仿古代，香港人他说了，
第3题了吧 ？Question 3。收集数据的主要方式，哎，它这也有吗？收集数据的主要方式是购物中心的入口处及面对面调查。然后它就可以用到吧？就是第1题啊，它不是就是数据收集的主要方式就是在这购物中心门口进行面对面调查，这就是刚才提到的刚才那种不同的方式，不同的数据收集方式嘛。对，好还是不好？评估 link 私有化的影响。link 是啥呀？link 是啊，他要先读3是吧？
要先读这个。
先读3。link rate 是一个什么吧？是一个那个，它可能是不是一个商场，还是一个什么？就是过去苏州爆发的清一市场50位摊主与业主领会之间，领会，它是一公司之间的纠纷与私有化的问题，就是可能是对，我想起来，我看了这个文章了，就是这个领会这个公司现在有一个，比如说它有一商场，然后现在呢我要把它私有化，然后以前呢都是一些提供中低端服务，我现在要升级改造，改成高端服务，那这样呢对应的我的那个中低端服务的人群，他就没地儿去消费了，就这种矛盾。大概就是这么意思啊。然后所以说他如果在门口去，
在门口去 face to face，
对，
不合理的。
对啊，
网上嘛。
因为他去门口的人可能就是说他只针对于我这个圈层的人，而我没有去跟他其他的，就是我对应我不是现在都是一些低端的嘛，那你在门口都是低端的，那我肯定就是不处于私有化，但是我可能会找一些高端人过来去跟他去调研，那其实是对他的样本量比较单一，他没有多样性。这个才对多样性，对吧？对，样本不充足。哎，先提一个得了，是吧？先有一个，然后第2个是在线问卷调查 Facebook 收集。
Some of you have finished. For those who haven't finished, hurry up.
评估市场数据收集的主要方法是在线问卷调查，借在评估它湿货市场的管理，收集在另一菜市场购物的香港人的意见。还有什么能提到的？除了那个多样性。
Okay, perhaps we'll discuss. Question 2. Number 1. How are you going to design your research and have research method for the research project? In what ways do Hong Kong people use Facebook for political engagement? Group 3, where are you? Okay, any idea?
没看到。
我看到了大部分，但是我没有。
在哪儿登记？没看到那登记的地儿啊。
在邮箱那里有吧？
邮箱发给他呀？
不是邮箱那里邮箱有你的名单，就组织。
这个
肯定你会拿。
邮箱里边。这是一个这些文档吗？你不得交上去吗？这得交上去。
不用，就编辑好了，你编辑完它就自动保存，大家都可以看到。
他不得不用提交吗？
不用提交，这是一个共享文档，编辑了就可以看到。
那对，你看，比如刚才打上纸，对呀，不是你们是在哪看的？不是，那是在哪提交啊？在哪组队呀？ 大部分的公布的话，发给那个他们的 assistant，不是线上的那种，不是线上直接做东西，不是提交的。就是把这个发个邮件给他。咱没发。现在给他发一下。
Okay. For Facebook, it's not compulsory for you to use Facebook in Hong Kong. And then, yes, using questionnaire is a good way to collect views, collect data for this research. And how are you going to distribute it? And because Facebook is an online media, you can use online questionnaire to collect data for this research. Because Facebook, if you use Facebook, you have online access, and then you may have access to Facebook on mobile phone or the internet. And online questionnaire will be a useful way to conduct research and collect data for this research. Okay, number 2. Question 2, number 2. And Group 4, where are you? Group 4, where are you?
咱这种，不是，应该是那些英语。
To what extent do Hong Kong civil servants have public service motivation? How are you going to collect data? What are the research methods? Anyone from Group 4 can answer.
正好线上线下发过去。
但是你要现在要组队，组2人队。
对呀。你没想这么多。
它是 Google Doc 还是什么？是 Google Doc 还是？
还要发一个这个给他。
那这个就直接发邮件了吗？
对，发邮件给他。咱们4个人还要分2组。
对，要分一下。
反正我的口语我的听读不好，但是读写还，但是读写还，
我也不好。
你也不会好，不是你俩英语怎么样啊？你俩英语比我俩好啊。
I think single search need to get a promotion and gain more money to support their family. So I think the more high promotion they get, more money.
But for this research, how are you going to collect data for this research? Question asks you to think of an appropriate research design and research method. And you can have in-depth interview with civil servants, high-ranking, middle-ranking, or low-ranking civil servants. And because Hong Kong civil servants, they have a telephone directory that is available online. You can phone them and ask them to fill in questionnaire. Telephone interview, telephone questionnaire, or in-depth interview may be appropriate ways to collect civil servants' view on to what extent they have public service motivation. Public service motivation is the motivation to serve the public. And how are you going to collect the views? Maybe you have in-depth interview for high-ranking official, middle-ranking official, or low-ranking official. And also, Hong Kong civil servants, they have their telephone available online, telephone directory, their office telephone. You can phone them to ask them to fill in questionnaire, telephone interview for filling in questionnaire. Number 3, how do Hong Kong people conceive justice as expressed in Hong Kong housing policy? Group 5, where are you?
I think the research design is the qualitative research.
Yes, good.
And the research methods is are interviewed or questionnaire or face-to-face survey.
Why?
The research aims at research.
People, what do you think of the policy? And they can tell us the stories. But we can't get the data from them because they very subjective based.
Yes, justice is a complicated concept, and it is difficult to define, and people have different conception of justice. And conducting in-depth interview may be an appropriate way. You collect different people's views on this complicated concept. And if you want to have survey or questionnaire, it is better that you conduct in-depth interview first. You collect opinion and help you to design the survey, because it is very difficult to design the survey, to design the questionnaire. And even if you just conduct qualitative in-depth interview, it may be enough for this research, because justice is a complicated concept. You look at the subjective meaning of the people, how they conceive justice. And if you really want to conduct questionnaire or survey, it is better that you conduct in-depth interview first as the first stage. Collect information so that help you to design the questionnaire. And it is difficult to design questionnaire for a concept like justice. If you really want to have questionnaire, it is better to conduct in-depth interview first. And even just conducting in-depth interview may be enough for this research, because the nature of the concept, justice, is complicated. Number 4, how do gay people conceive the extent of discrimination against them in Hong Kong? Group 6, where are you? Okay?
I think we will use next step. First of all, we will decide an online questionnaire, because we think this way may be better protect the privacy of those gay people, since we think if we do the questionnaire offline, they might not be willing to share their real preference to us. So we decided to use the online questionnaire first. And also, we will, in our questionnaire, we will decide a ranking system. Like the full marks are, for example, like 5, which means that you think the society is really unfriendly to the gay people, and 0 is that you feel, even though you're a gay people, you feel free in Hong Kong. So we will collect the data that the gay people rank, so we can calculate the average score that they think about how they feel about the discrimination in Hong Kong to them. Also, we will ask some questions like, do you have any experience that you have been discriminated by other people in Hong Kong, like that? So internally we will have a group of quantitative data and also the qualitative data to support our research.
How can you get the qualitative data?
Also by questionnaire.
For qualitative data, you do not get it through questionnaire. For questionnaire, you collect quantitative data. For in-depth interview focus group, you collect qualitative data in words. Quantitative data is in numbers. And from the questionnaire, you get statistics and quantitative data. Use statistics to analyze it. But you are saying that you are having online questionnaire. but the gay people are minority. Most of the people who fill in your questionnaire may be heterosexual instead of gay. How can you focus on the gay people?
Yes, we also think about this question. We decide to launch our questionnaire on the those channels which always talk about the gay topics on YouTube, or the online celebrities who is gay people's representatives.
Yes, if you do this, the sample may be very small. And because gay people, most of them do not want others to know that they are gay. Most of them are hidden. You have a minority of them, and it is difficult to target at them. And one of the means may be there's organization serving gay people, and you can through the organization they get referrals for you to fill in the questionnaire. But the questionnaire needs a lot of sample, 100, 200. It is difficult to reach 200 gay people. Maybe in-depth interview. Ask the gay organization to refer you to have 20, 30 cases to have in-depth interview. These may be more feasible. And if you really want to have survey, you can have gay organization help you to distribute the online survey. But you need to have a screening question. The first question is, do you identify yourself as gay? Because there are people in the gay organization, they are not gay, they are serving the gay people. They are not gay. And you need to have a screening question. Ask you, do you identify yourself as gay and lesbian? To screen out those who are not gay. But it is not very feasible to get about 200 gay people to fill in the questionnaire. Maybe having qualitative in-depth interview may be one way to make it more feasible. Or you have one or two friends who tell you that they are gay. You start with them, ask them to do in-depth interview. And after that, ask them to refer you 2 or 3 cases that are also gay. And then you interview the referrals. After the referral, you ask them to refer further case, and you get the snowball sampling. We talk about snowball sampling later. The ball gets bigger and bigger, from 1 or 2 friends to 2 or 5 or 6 gay people, then to 9 to 10 gay people. Ask them to refer you further cases, their friends who are gay. And this may be one way to make it feasible. Okay? You do snowball sampling, or you do it through the gay organization serving gay people. Okay? These are difficult because gay people do not tell their identity, and they are the minority. How are you going to find them out to fill in the questionnaire or do the interview? Okay? Okay, next question. Question 3, number 1. Group 7, where are you?
Here.
Okay.
We think that the problem in this research design might be, according to the article below, it said the move will force residents in the surrounding housing estates to walk to the next closest market to shop for fresh produce. And if we administer face-to-face survey at the entrance of the linked shopping malls, we might miss the people that don't go to the shopping mall. They go to the other market.
Yes, good.
And the impact might not be comprehensive, I think. And we think that the problem in this design is like that.
Yes, for those who go to the linked shopping malls, they think that there's something good about the shopping mall, the linked shopping mall, before they go. Or they think that the good side is more than the bad side. That's why they go to the linked shopping mall. If you stand in front of the entrance of the linked shopping mall to collect data, You may have biased collection of data, mostly positive, or if not all, mostly positive. For those who think that the link shopping mall are not good, they stay away, they don't go there. You miss the views of the people who think that link shopping mall is no good. Okay? This is one of the problem with the research design, and you need to think of other ways how to collect the data. If you go to the entrance of the link shopping mall, you collect positive views, and your data collection is biased. You're not going to have a balanced collection of data. Okay, this group is very good. Your answer is perfect. Okay, next group, group 8. Question 3, number 2. Where is group 8?
Well, in my view, it is that the research aims to evaluate the length of link web markets by the online questionnaire. I think it is not right. Since online questionnaire is not a good way to do the research, since the objects are hard to find in Facebook or other social media. So maybe the easy way is do the interview by face-to-face to these house owner or the shop market owner.
Yes, the link web market.
Yeah.
If the people who think the link web market are selling things that are expensive, they tend to be the poor and the elders. For the poor and the elders, they don't fill in online questionnaire. The elders, they don't have internet access or they don't know how to use internet. For the poor people, they may not afford to have smart mobile phone or computer or internet access. They may have difficult internet access. But they think that the link web market, the products there are expensive. If you have online questionnaire, you are leaving out the poor people, leaving out the elders information. And then you have a biased data collection. Those middle class, those who are rich, they find that the products are not expensive. And you're collecting their views. They use online question, they can fill an online question, they have internet access, they have smart mobile phone. And they think that yes, the environment improved a lot after privatization with link. It is good, the views are positive, but you're leaving the negative views of the elders and the poor people. You're collecting the views of those who are rich enough to answer the online questionnaire with internet access and smart mobile phone. Okay, if you have online questionnaire, you think about, are you leaving some people who are disadvantaged? For example, the elders, the poor people. Are they able to fill in the questionnaire? Are you having a biased data collection? Okay, number 3. Next group. Group 9, where are you? Okay. Number 3.
Which will affect the authenticity of the data. There is only 2 private housing areas, which is so small. That's all.
Even though if you focus on 2 private housing areas, but after redevelopment, usually those poor people, they are forced to move out. They cannot afford the high house price after redevelopment. And then they have left the neighborhood. Only those who are rich, those middle class, they can afford to move back after the redevelopment. And if you collect face-to-face survey in the street and ask them to compare 10 years, the environment 10 years ago with That's after redevelopment. They are rich and they move back, they see that yes, the environment improved a lot. After redevelopment, the environment improved a lot. But those poor people, those disadvantaged group, they are forced to move out. They will not be there to answer your questionnaire. Because you are staying in the street, in the two neighborhoods, in the two private housing areas. Okay, those poor people may be forced to move out, they will not be there to answer your questionnaire. And then you have a biased collection of data. You have positive views. Yes, the environment improved a lot 10 years ago, when compared to 10 years ago. But those poor people, they are forced to move out, they cannot fill in your questionnaire. Okay? When you design the research, you need to think about whether your collection of data are leaving some groups, and are these groups views important to your research? You need to have a balanced collection of data. Okay? These exercises help you to think about your research design for your capstone. Make sure that you do not leave out some important groups, especially those disadvantaged and the weak, when you are doing capstone research. Okay? And then these are some of the reasons.
然后现在选了几个题，然后让那个就是老师帮你选几个题，然后那个现在要求是阅读5年内的所有相关的论文，然后那个1周或者2周之后跟老师讨论。那你写的什么？选的老师还是题？老师就是那个谁吗？张小玲。对呀，就一个人。那不用选吧？那不是自动的吗？